What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. As always, Juan here, and I'm very excited to, as always, sit down with you guys to talk about more sports creative content. Today's video is another sit-down podcast-style interview with my friend Michael GOIZMAN, who is a content creator and photographer in the UFC and MMA world. Michael is an incredibly talented photographer and visual creative, and is the director for social for Fight Club, one of the biggest UFC pages on Instagram with over 170,000 followers. He has an incredible resume, has seen some unbelievable events, and has a really good knowledge on how to build an athlete's brand, but also how to run a social page to maintain an audience and also contribute to the sport in so many different ways. For the record, I don't actually have a name for this show yet. I was thinking about naming it the Sports Creative Podcast, but part of me thinks that's too basic, but I also think it's really easy to search for and to find. So that's what I'm going to be naming it right now, is the Sports Creative Podcast video show. I don't even know if I want to call it a podcast because this is going to be on YouTube for the most part. But if you guys have an idea for the show and what it should be called, leave it down in the description below. But moving forward, enjoy this sit-down chat with Michael. Super insightful. I hope you guys learned a lot from him, because believe me, just sitting down with him for an hour was so insightful. So here's the rest of the episode. I hope you guys enjoy. We're just going to start off because I don't have a name for this show yet. Right. I don't have a name for whatever this is. If you have any recommendations, please let me know. But for those watching, you guys are familiar that I obviously did a bit of a sit-down episode with another friend previously. I have a new friend here. He's going to introduce himself in a second, but I'm just going to use this series as an opportunity to connect and introduce other creatives who I'm friends with or I'm connected with in some way. Probably going to start just in Toronto, but we'll see where this goes, just to kind of highlight other people in other niche sports. So today we have... Will you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Michael GOIZMAN, I guess.
Yeah.
Some say Mike, some say Mika. There's a couple of different monikers in the industry.
So Michael is a UFC content creator. Would that be the best way of kind of describing
That's
him?
what we're going with.
That's what we're going with. So he is a UFC content creator. He shoots photography and video, and he's actually a social media manager for one of the biggest UFC social content pages on Instagram, if I'm right. So if you want to just give us a little bit of an intro as to who you are, what you do, and kind of, who is Michael, kind of in a sense?
Yeah, I mean, it started a while ago. So without getting too into the details, 2016, I was working as an operations manager for a sports gaming company that made a huge shift into the social media game. We were trying to push acquisition from social media to sports gaming. And by doing so, we found this crazy niche of like sports content that was available if we just owned some really great handles on Instagram. And it was all about the handles for a long time, at Ball, at NBA Memes, some really big ones, but we ended up getting Fight Club. Fight Club was a nothing page, 10 followers. It was really doing nothing, and me being a fight fan, they just kind of handed it to me and said, here's a page. I didn't manage pages, I knew nothing about social media. And a year later, we're at almost 200,000 followers, verified, creating original content, and my job is to manage all that chaos.
Wow, yeah, you were telling me before we started, like I said, what would you describe yourself? And you're like a manager of chaos.
That's all it is on day to day.
Wow. Okay, so obviously I want to talk about this because I remember, because for context, we were kind of internet friends, I guess, to a degree. Like we followed each other, we just liked each other's stuff, and then the other week is like, let's just go grab a beer. I want to connect with you. And I think the first thing that stuck out to me, and this is kind of not related to the UFC but what you just said, you guys kind of monopolized handles. Yeah. And you guys just kind of like took the reins and like stole.
No, you could call it stole. Yeah. You stole for a fair price.
You guys stole for a fair price several handles, and then you fall into the Fight Club one. But like, what was the point of like taking all those handles? Maybe like, it's such an interesting kind of concept, because obviously people nowadays will pay money for a specific handle if they really want it, if it aligns with their brand. Like, what was that all about?
Look, it's all about how much weight do you put on the importance of having your handle. Like, your handle is super important to you because of the way you've grown it, but some people just want to see a name. And our co-founders noticed that people would gravitate towards really short, what we called OG handles. So typically handles with 4 letters or less. So one of our founders had a 2-letter handle, which was pretty much unheard of. And we found that the less letters you have in a niche space, we get traffic. So at Ball, for example, you can use it in so many different spaces, and it did so well. So we just kept growing and buying new pages and trying to grow them and build brands. And by doing so, we found that there was 3 or 4 main brands, and then everything else was just under. And we built like a hierarchy of great Instagram handles, which took us where we are today.
Wow. So how to finesse the social media handle empire was how it all kind of started.
Pretty much, yeah.
In terms of getting Fight Club. But let's take it back, like, before the Fight Club thing ever happened. Obviously, you're a photographer, you're a videographer, you're a content creator at your core. How did you start doing that? Like, what was your start in, it doesn't have to be UFC specific, but like, when did you first pick up a camera? When did you get your start doing this stuff?
I like to think that it was before the time that everybody wanted to be a content creator and a videographer and photographer, when it was really, really slowly growing, but the rate was multiplying quickly. It was still early, you were seeing content creators, but for me it was more, I was in second year university. I didn't really want to spend money on going to sports events, but I really wanted to be there with great seats. So my approach was, I see photographers have the best seats in the house. So if I just go rent a camera, maybe I can get credentialed. Even if I don't know what I'm doing, I'll go grab a camera and I'll try to weasel my way into courtside access. And the first time I tried it was, I went to Brock, so
oh yeah, I forgot you went
so
to. This is a Ryerson Rams household.
I'll leave
right?
now. Thank you. So the first one was the U18 Americas that they hosted in St. Catharines. RJ Barrett was playing, and a whole bunch of talent there. So I'm like, there's nothing to lose. I'm gonna go rent a camera. I think I'd rented.
Just see what happens.
Whatever happens,
Throw caution
happens.
to the wind. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm like, I bought the camera from Best Buy. I think it was a Nikon like D500 or something,
Okay.
5000. I don't even remember anymore. But I walked up courtside. I sat down. Within 30 seconds, someone came up to me. They're like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And I'm like, "I'm media." And they're like, "But you don't have your media pass or your media jacket." I'm like, "Where do I get one?" He said, "In the back." And then from there, I just kept buying cameras, returning them, and going to events.
Lesson learned: if you want to get into sporting events, just
cheat and lie.
Go get a camera, lie, and pretend like you know what you're doing.
No one's gonna ask questions to a person with a nice camera.
If you act like you've been there before, no one's ever going to ask questions. So obviously you snuck your camera into the events just to get the best in the house. You had to play the role of photographer, even though you probably didn't know how to use a camera. But how did you go from that to like actually learning to take photography and video and falling in love with that and taking it further? How did that progress?
It was more just seeing what the people around me were doing, right? I met a lot of people who were super passionate about what they were doing in the photography space, and instead of just sitting there for 3 hours watching the game, I had to somewhat pretend like I knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
So instead of just pretending, over the next 2-3 months, I studied every ounce of the photography game, and how to shoot manual, how to get good lighting, what's your aperture.
Spent a lot of time on YouTube.
A lot of time on YouTube. Shout out to Peter McKinnon.
The boy.
No free ads.
No
free ads.
No, that's not an ad. That's an icon. That's an icon. Peter, if you're watching, icon.
So yeah, that's what it was. I'm sure there's a lot of people that could have been better to watch, but Peter McKinnon was kind of the staple of the newbies getting into the game, and he was really, really good at explaining it and breaking it down. So the next few months, I just got really into shooting, and video was far later. But at first, I love shooting photos. Like, I love capturing moments of athletes that I could then send to them, and I always made it a priority to, after the games, go find the athletes, send them the photos, even if they were crap, because most of the time they were crap. Looking back at the work we did when we started, it was all garbage, most likely, unless you hit one lucky shot. But
I mean, right before I shot this, I shot a YouTube video like right before you came about like reacting to my old stuff, and it's like you look back on it, and it's trash, but relatively like. When you look back on it, you're able to notice one or two things. Obviously, your personal growth, but also you notice like the basis of what your style is now. Yeah. Like I look at my videos from back in. I just looked at my videos from back in 2018, and I'm like, this is horrendous. But I see the way I shoot is very rooted in the way I started.
Right. It's your style.
Yeah, it's your style.
Doesn't change. Just you've made improvements on your style.
Exactly. And I think like I can also speak to like Peter McKinnon, like learning from all those guys, and like that was how I started too. Like I mean, for me, it was like I was in school for this in a way, and I picked up a camera and I ended up shooting sports very much in the university in the OUA, same kind of come up as you. So I really relate to that. So obviously you start with shooting at Brock and their sports teams here and there. But now you're shooting MMA, which is a very niche sport. Like I said, kind of to you and my friend earlier, Near, I've interviewed now 2 people who have shot very niche, unique sports. It's not basketball, it's not hockey, it's not soccer, football. Yeah. So how did you get into mixed martial arts? Did you do it as a kid? I know you mentioned you do jiu-jitsu, but like how did you get into the world of mixed martial arts?
Yeah, aside from traditional, growing up doing karate because your parents made you when you were 5 years old, I had a buddy in high school who used to beat the living crap out of us. Like just this like lanky, nerdy kid, shout out to Silbs, he used to beat the shit out of us, and that made us all want to start boxing. So grade 10, I took some boxing classes, and I got lucky in St. Catharines. There's a great gym, SBG Niagara, and they're one of the best beginner-friendly MMA gyms in the world, and as soon as I got there, just fell in love with the sport, fell in love with the people, fell in love with why people do mixed martial arts, aside of what people see, getting kicked in the head and the violence behind it. There's so much grit and personality in that sport that I went from I only want to shoot hockey and basketball and football to I only want to shoot combat sports. I want to learn these people's stories, and I got obsessed with why Ontario MMA is so restrictive, why everything is so tough for the fighters in Ontario and Canada, and then it just spiraled. It spiraled like crazy. I fell in love with the fighters, the sport, doing the sport, and especially shooting the sport. Like it's special. Like when you shoot mixed martial arts, there's something different than shooting hockey or basketball. It's very personal.
So kind of jumping on that actually really leads into my next question, which is like, what's your favorite part about shooting it? And you just touched on it. And for me, for contrast, like I'm very varied in what I shoot. A lot of football, a lot of hockey, a lot of basketball. But and I think having done martial arts before, like I did Taekwondo when I was younger and I took it for a long time. I understand that there's some other element to combat sports and martial arts. There's like kind of like it has a life of its own, really. But can you talk about like a little bit more about what that is and what's your favorite thing about shooting MMA?
To start, it was more that I had relationships with the people that I was shooting for. So a lot of the athletes that I was shooting, I'd either have trained with before or I looked up to as an athlete. So for me to be able to be at the events, again, just getting cage side access to MMA events. So back to the roots, I wanted to be in the best seats in the house.
At this point, you knew how to use a camera?
At this point, I knew how to use a camera. I invested a little money in my own, and I got to deliver these pictures, these moments for the fighters that nobody else was doing. There's very few photographers out there that love to shoot combat sports. So when I was there, I was, I think ahead of the game in terms of the quality of my shots because, again, I use really good gear and that's a bit of a cop-out, but I love delivering great photos of great moments to people that I knew appreciated them so much, which I feel like you don't get as much in other sports. I feel like there's so many NBA photographers and basketball photographers and hockey photographers and football photographers. There's really not that many combat sports photographers, and it means a lot to the fighters. They really appreciate when you capture those moments, whether they're bloody, whether they're good, whether they're bad. They keep those for a long time.
When we met up, what I really connected with you is we both have that kind of common passion. It's I know a lot of people shoot the sports for different reasons, or shoot sports for different reasons, whether that's to help highlight a league or tell capture just sorry, what I'm trying to get to is that I think what you and I have in common is the wanting to capture those moments and share them with the people that have them. For me, whether I'm shooting Ryerson Athletics back in the day or now shooting with the NHL or the CFL, one of the biggest things that my favorite things is sharing that with those people and giving it to them, because that's a memory they're going to have, but to actually have something physical physical or digital to remember it by is something that they'll never forget. For me, our Ryerson, the Ryerson women's team won nationals and OUA against Brock, unfortunately. But one of my favorite things that time was not just posting about it on social, but actually giving this to the girls and be like, hey, I have this clip of you celebrating, here it is, or sending it to another one and be like, I have this clip of you and your mom having a moment after the game. That's what it's
priceless.
all about.
That's priceless.
And I think that's what gets lost in this world. It's I think everyone's in chase of the social media clout and in search of likes and numbers. And it kind of becomes less of the moment and more of I shot this person. Yeah. But I think you have a really good grasp on taking the moment for what it is and capturing it and then giving it to someone and more as a gift, as a memory.
It's again, a lot of people are doing it out of necessity now, right? People are trying to make a career out of the photo game, the video game, and for them, what gets the clicks is I shot J. Cole at his, CBL debut, and good for them. I'm not ragging on that at all. If you can get those pictures and you do a great job, fantastic. But just remember why you're doing it. Remember why people love to do it and what makes a great relationship between a photographer and an athlete. Because there's lots of photographers, but building relationships with the athletes is what's going to get you to that next level. Building relationships with the other creators, building relationships with the leagues. That's what really matters in the long run. Because when they think of somebody to call to shoot, not necessarily a game, but let's say we have a
fashion shoot,
a Hall of Fame ceremony, something behind the scenes. Yeah. They're going to call somebody that they trust, not somebody that they think is a great photographer necessarily. You need both. You have to be.
Relationships are, and I've learned that too. In my experience, building those connections and being a genuine person is just as important as actually shooting the thing. And I think you and I really clicked on the fact that we both have a common interest of wanting to help athletes build their brand and help their visual image, because I think athletes are becoming way more aware that their social media presence is incredibly important. And I think we see it a lot in basketball and football. But I think other athletes around the world are realizing if you want, and I think this goes for influencers too, if you want to market yourself as an athlete who's brands can approach and you can make more money off that, you need to bring someone on.
100%.
Because you can do everything with your phone just fine, but you know, as an athlete, like you're waking up, you're training, you're going to the gym, you're working out. Like there's so many things you need to bring someone on to supplant that and give you like the high quality content.
The last thing you want to worry about is, did I get a high quality photo of me doing this that I can post on Instagram?
Get someone to do it.
Yeah, or can I repurpose this for TikTok and YouTube and whatever platform is next on there? It's a lot. Like it's a full-time job, and it's great because every athlete, hypothetically, if every athlete embraces this brand building initiative, and all the creatives out there all have new relationships that they can build. If every athlete has their person, then great. There's more jobs for everybody. But
and how is it in UFC? Are athletes starting to notice that? I know, like, I watched a podcast once, listened to a podcast once with Conor McGregor's photographer.
Yeah.
I don't remember his name. You might know it.
Ginger beer photography.
Yes,
I can't remember.
Yeah, but you know what I'm talking about. I listened to a Black with No Cream. If you guys, I'll link it down in the description. Great interview with Conor McGregor's photographer. But I think it's a perfect example of like a content creator being at the right place at the right time.
For sure.
And Conor being like, I fuck with you.
You're my guy.
You're my guy now. Is that something you're hoping to get to, is to get an attention of a fighter of a high caliber, him to look at you and be like, hey, like I want you to be my guy? Or what would you want to do in that space of brand building for an athlete?
I would love to be able to tell the story of every single athlete on the UFC roster, and even in, you know, lower leagues and stuff like that, because aside from what everyone's seen with Conor McGregor, every fighter, I would say 99% of fighters have a phenomenal story. They all have great backgrounds. None of them come from like, you know, boring, you know, upbringings. A lot of them come from struggle. A lot of them come from struggle and strife, and they've made it through some really dark shit to get to where they are now. And whenever I meet athletes, I always try to get the story, right? Everyone wants to get the interview. They want to get the soundbite of, you know, how do you think your next fight's going to finish? Are you going to knock him out? Are you going to submit him? You know, can you make a prediction? But telling the story is way more important. So working with guys like Michael Johnson, who, you know, I've always been a huge fan of. I have videos when I was starting to watch combat sports of me cheering him on at fights when I was sitting in the bleachers, and then getting to work with him is awesome. So it's just building relationships with all these athletes. If I could pick one athlete to just follow for the rest of his career.
Put it out there. Maybe he'll watch it.
Hey, I'll keep that between me and him, but I think he knows who it is. We got something in the works, but I'd love to be able to tell an athlete's story start to finish.
Yeah.
Like the Allen Iverson book I was showing you.
Yes.
That's
being
incredible.
part of their legacy.
The journey.
Yeah, the journey. That's all.
Just like Ginger Beer Photography and Conor, that's a gold mine.
Yeah.
They built an entire brand off that as well. The Mac Life Official, which is their social media network now, is huge. So shout out to Conor, shout out to Ginger Beard, and
I'll link down in the description that
all those
podcast
guys.
Episode that I mentioned. It's awesome. You should definitely check it out if you're interested in MMA or even just sports photography. The photography that they do with Conor is, and I think Conor is a bigger than life. He's bigger than the sport, which is, you know, good and bad for its own reasons. But I think he's the perfect example of an athlete at the top of their level who understands, like, what I do outside of the octagon and put on social media is just as important as my results, because fighting isn't forever.
Say what you want about Conor, but nobody has grown the sport more than him. Like, nobody has brought more eyes to the sport and showed up for big fights and big moments and made more clips and done better engagement than Conor McGregor. He's a one of one. I can say there will never be another Conor McGregor. I don't even know who would even be a close second. It's tough to say. There's some huge names in the sport right now, but he changed the game. He definitely changed everything about it.
Moving forward from that kind of athlete brand conversation, because I feel like that's
we could go on for
we
days.
could go on forever. Moving on, obviously you've been shooting this. Let's kind of take it chronologically here. How do you go from, I'm assuming, shooting local combat sports in Ontario, in St. Catharines or wherever? How do you go from that to getting the attention of Michael Bisping and running this Fight Club page? How do you go from A to B? Because it seems like a night and day difference in terms of like where you were to where you are now.
Look, I'm still, in my head, I'm still on that journey, right? For me, the end all be all would be cage side photography for the UFC, which I haven't gotten to yet, but I don't want to rush it. Like, I'm really enjoying this process of, you know, the social media page and then going to events and documenting, and eventually, obviously I would love to shoot cage side, but the Bisping thing was just really lucky because he was a co-founder of the gaming company. So through the company, I got to know him. I got to have some dinners with him, speak with him, and he's, like a lot of fighters, the most genuine type of person that you'll meet. They're kind, caring, they're super considerate, but obviously they're known as savages.
Yes.
But
they beat the shit out of each other in a cage.
People for money, and it looks bad to a lot of people, but when you get to know them, they're great people. And Bisping's always been super helpful with anything I needed. I wanted to do a combat sports internship. He made like a video recording recommendation for me. And then when I asked him, hey, this Fight Club brand is growing, can you get us access to the UFC? Didn't even blink.
Yeah.
Within 2 days, I had access to the UFC, and then I was taking my skills in photography, videography to the UFC and seeing what the hell I can do there. Like I went there not knowing what to expect, what we would be doing, and I got the support of obviously upper management to send me to these events, so forever grateful for that.
Yeah.
And we figured it out as we go, and then I started the whole process all over again, just relationship building instead of on the amateur level. Now it's at the UFC, and it's still early days, but it's cool.
I think people forget that this process will reset every level you get. Like for me, like Ryerson was the first step. Like OUA, shooting OUA sports is the first step, and you're building relationships. You're going through the process, you're learning. But then when you get, like now that I'm with the NHL, or even when I was with the Argos and MLSE, like every single ladder, you're kind of reset. You're at the bottom of the ring. You got to build those relationships. You got to connect with people. And I think people really underestimate how important networking is in this industry, because I think in sports, especially the more niche you go, it's not what you can do, but it's really who you know.
Yeah, and especially like you said, you made the TikTok about like the old heads at the events that have, they're well established. They've earned that.
Yeah,
they've earned the right to be there.
Absolutely.
They were where you are at one point, but they're no longer responding to anybody, or they don't need to.
They built themselves up.
They built themselves to where they are today.
Does that mean they can push you aside and take your spot? Absolutely not.
No, but there's a hierarchy. There's always a hierarchy,
Absolutely.
and you got to earn that.
Yeah.
So I always respect the old heads. I love to learn from the old heads, because as much as we think
they've seen shit.
They've seen shit.
They've seen, especially in MMA.
Yeah.
I think they've seen shit.
In MMA, it's a tight community. It's not like the other 5 major sports. The MMA,
once you know somebody, once you're there, everyone knows you.
If you've been around the UFC for a while, everybody knows everybody, and it's cool to see the relationships and the struggles between media outlets and photographers and videographers in MMA, because it's very different. You're all in a small room, and you get to know who's who really, really quick. And there's some awesome people at the UFC. The one thing I can say, sorry to cut you off again,
go for
but my tangent goes on, is that the UFC is the coolest organization ever. I've worked with a lot of cool brands, but everyone there is just so happy to be there. They're so friendly. They're so nice. They all want you to be there. So working there could be a really, really cool long-term play if
it works
out. If it works out. But if it doesn't, back to square one.
Yeah.
Back to networking, yeah.
Okay. 2 things I want to touch on there. First off was just taking it back a second to Michael Bisping.
Yeah.
How does he hit you up? Like, how does a guy with his stature, did he slide into your DMs? Did you get in contact with him through his agent? Or how did that relationship start? How did you meet him?
He doesn't hit you up. You hit him up. So he was, he's really close. He's one of the co-founders of the company. Yes. So he was always in communication with my bosses. And I had to pry and say, hey, I want to bother Michael Bisping about this or that. And I think that I've earned a certain amount of respect within the company, where I had the freedom to go out and say, hey, Michael Bisping, can I have this? Or could you help me out with this? Or
this is what I want to do. Here's my pitch.
Exactly, pretty much. And he was super accommodating all the time. And I like to think that I've earned that respect, instead of just being, you most likely can't go up to any athlete and just say, hey, can I have this? Or could you do this for me? It doesn't work that way. You got to build up that relationship.
Trust.
And I was 16, 17 at the time when I started working, and then I didn't ask him for anything till I was 21.
Yeah.
Right? So it was 4 or 5 years of...
And even then you're offering him something.
Yeah.
You're saying, I don't want this from you, but I want to do this with you and get your blessing for it, to get your permission.
Exactly. He's the face of the Fight Club brand, and what he's done in the fight game speaks for itself.
Of course.
Former middleweight champion of the world, one of the greatest to ever do it, Hall of Famer.
GOAT. One of the GOATs.
Broadcaster, UFC commentator. He's done it all. So for me to ask him for anything, it's more of...
Probably really intimidating at this moment.
Oh, 100%. It still is. Every time...
You probably see him and you're like...
Every time we talk, there's still that, what is it? Shell shock or whatever it is from
kind of like starstruck.
Starstruck from meeting one of those athletes. But
what's been your most starstruck moment apart from Bisping? What's that one moment you walked into a room and you saw someone, you were like...
I have weird ones. I have really weird starstruck moments. I don't really get phased with the big names, like the Israel Adesanyas. I met him. He was awesome. Obviously, you would think, but then I meet guys like James Krause, which is a name that most likely nobody knows in the industry.
I don't even know who he is.
He's a former fighter. Now he's a head coach, founder of Glory MMA, and he's just one of those brilliant minds in combat sports that when I meet him, it's not so much as a fighter. It's as a person, you're awesome. Like, you're a really cool person. I would love to get to know you or to pick your brain or to work with you on some stuff. But as a fighter, they're all people. I've been around fighters for a long time, so it doesn't faze me too much. It's like those brilliant minds that I see outside of the cage and hear their podcasts and listen to them speak and see they're doing cool stuff on social media that really get to me. So James Krause is one that sticks out for sure.
Okay, amazing. It's kind of speaking about, I kind of want to transition now into your actual experience shooting UFC. Because, like, I mean, I've never been to a fight, but I've watched them, obviously. I think it's an incredible sport. But, like, the atmosphere surrounding an event, the energy in an arena when there's a fight going on is unheard of. Like, there are very few sports that get viewership, that build suspense, that market their athletes and their sports so well. Like, almost no one can touch the UFC. What was your first UFC experience and what was running through your mind? Because, like, for me, contrast, like, I just shot my first NHL game in March.
Yeah.
And it's an outdoor game and I'm out there and I'm, like, absolutely about, like, to shit my pants.
But you killed it.
Thank you. I'd like to think I did.
Yeah, you did.
But, like, you know, it's kind of the first one you'll never forget.
Yeah.
What was your first UFC event that you shot, and what was going through your mind?
First event I shot was UFC 272, I think, in Houston. God, if I got that wrong, people are gonna absolutely scold me. But it was Adesanya versus Whitaker 2. That was in Houston, Texas, and I was just, the whole week, I could not believe where I was. Like, from press conference day to weigh-ins to ceremonials to fight night to being in the media room, like, I had to step back every 20 minutes and just, like, put my camera down
And soak it in.
just soak it all in, because it doesn't feel real. Like, 2-3 years ago, I was telling myself I'd love to shoot for the UFC, but if it never happens, I'll be fine. And then being at the events and seeing all these big names and seeing all these,
It's real.
The operations that goes into a UFC event are crazy. So for me to just be there, taking a step back was surreal.
What's a typical event week like for you? Like, kind of give us the run through from, like, the first day you get to the city to the end of the fight. What do you do? Like, what's your process like?
The good thing about UFC weeks is they're extremely linear. Like, you know exactly what you're going to be looking at all week. Wednesday is media day. All the athletes come up, they do their interviews, blah, 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 move on. Thursday is a press conference for big events, so they hold a big, everyone talks shit.
What you see on TV all the time.
Exactly. They talk shit, they throw water bottles at each other, and then they move on. Friday is the toughest day because in the morning they all have to make weight. So the athletes from Thursday morning to Friday around noon are the most miserable people in the world because they just cut 20 to 30 pounds.
They're not eating.
They're not eating, they're not drinking, and I made a video on, like, the truth behind weight cutting with Max Griffin, a UFC welterweight. And it's
That'll
tough.
be in the description below as well.
It's tough to watch. Like, it's tough to watch these guys kill themselves to then go get kicked in the face, punched in the face, and grapple. Like, it's unfathomable to watch. So until noon, you try not to bother any athletes, and then they have ceremonial weigh-ins Friday nights where they all face off and they're all happy again. And Saturday is fight day. You wake up in the morning, you get your shit ready, you go sit in the media room, and you just watch fights with all the other media members. You're all in this room. It's like all the media teams that you can think of that you see on social media are all in one room watching fights, and there's definitely moments during big fights because they're just on screens. You can go back and forth between the cage and media room, but where we're all just fight fans. Everybody in that room at the end of the day,
they're just loving it.
We just love to watch fights. There's very few people in that room that they're there strictly for business purposes. We're all fight fans. So if a fight gets crazy, as impartial as we're trying to be, there's no chance. If somebody lands a head kick, if there's a great fight on, beautiful grappling exchanges, the whole room is watching. We're in awe. And then, whenever the main event rolls around, the media room funnels out to the arena.
You want to be in there.
Oh man, it's special.
You don't want to be in the media room. You want to be in the atmosphere.
As much as the media room is cool, that's where you get all your good content. There's nothing like being in the arena
during a main event.
A crazy fight. Yeah.
So are you shooting at all, or what do you, or is it mostly just managing the social?
I have not earned my stripes yet as a UFC photographer. Right now I'm doing a lot of the media room stuff where I'm recording interviews, uploading, making graphics, posting, just the whole
monotonous
stuff. Exactly.
Yeah.
All the stuff that you need
You're
to
earning your
content.
stripes.
Exactly. So I'm putting in the work, getting content for Fight Club, live tweeting, posting on Instagram, graphics, videos, all that stuff, doing pretty much anything you can think of aside from shooting.
But you do get to shoot the interviews and the media day and the pressers, and that's a lot of the stuff I see on your page. Yeah. Obviously, I think those big press conferences are highlights because people talk a lot of shit. People throw stuff at each other. People are insulting anybody. What's your most memorable moment that you've captured at a press conference event for the UFC? Because some of those images like are iconic, like going back all the way.
Yeah.
Like, you know, what's one of your favorite moments that you've been at that you were like capturing? What was like one thing that sticks in your mind?
There's two, I think that, well, one of them was not I captured, one of them was just a moment. The other one was Grant Dawson after his fight. He had a tough fight. It was at the UFC Apex in Vegas. And I posted the video. It was, he came backstage and he spoke about perspective. He spoke about like complacency breeds
I remember you posted this.
Yeah, and it was one of those moments where I'm like, I'm glad I'm recording, but I don't want to edit anything. I just want to take in that this fighter just fought for 3 rounds, and he's talking about perspective. He's talking about, you know, never giving up on the grind and understanding why you do what you do, and that there are bigger things in life than the success. And when you're so busy all the time, working 24/7, trying to grow a brand and try to build a name, it's tough to take a step back and say, you know, there are things that are more important than an Instagram post, than a TikTok, than a YouTube video.
It brings everything into perspective as is, like literally.
Yeah, and then the other moment was pretty much the same. I was sitting cage side for a fight where I was supposed to be live tweeting and getting content, but the fight was just so phenomenal. And I was like, I'm cage side.
Watching this
fight. I just pushed my computer away and I just sat and watched the rest of the fight, and it was...
Sometimes you got to do that, though. You just got to enjoy the moment.
It's hard.
What's the most memorable fight that you've been at?
Oh, that's so easy. Tony Ferguson, Michael Chandler. I was sitting like dead center in the media booth, like in media row, which is like, I think they're the best seats in the house.
Yeah, it's like right behind the front.
It's a little further back, so you've got
you've
got some elevation. You can see into the cage.
Damn.
And it was me and like a couple of my really good friends in the media room. We all went to watch the fight, and it's one of those fights where you knew it wasn't going to be boring. You knew there's no way it could be boring, but the front kick that knocked out Tony Ferguson will forever be a moment that I'll never, like, it's engraved into my brain.
How much more brutal is the sport that close? Because we see it on TV all the time, and these guys are getting like the shit kicked out of each other.
Yeah.
But how much, especially like that Tony Ferguson kick, because I know what you're talking about, how much more physically intimidating is it to see these giant men and women even beat each other like to near, like what is that? What is the difference between seeing it on TV and being there meters away from it?
For a lot of people, it's really tough to watch.
Okay,
like there's definitely an aspect of that I totally understand when someone says I'm not comfortable watching UFC fights.
Because they're just,
it's not for everybody.
Of course.
But when you've been in there, you understand it. Like, it's human chess at the end of the day. Like they're both trained athletes. It's not like there's a giant man in there with a tiny person and they're trying to beat the shit out of each other on different levels. Like, they both made the same weight. They are matched up because they're equal training. Their skill level is similar, and they're both in there trying to, you know, separate the other person from consciousness, and that's what they signed up for. That's a
really good say of knock the fuck out.
That's how most of them put it, right? My job is to go in there and separate you from consciousness, and it's brutal. Like, it's definitely brutal, but it's the most core-rooted aspect of like our animalistic instincts, primal
to survive,
to get in there for money, for everything, for legacy. You get in there with another human being. And
all hands are like, everything's off the table.
But to answer your question, it's brutal. Yeah, like there's some really brutal fights where you're watching like, oh god, I need this to stop.
Yeah.
But there's some other fights where
I think at the beginning when you said like there's something else to the sport, and like there's just some other feeling you don't get. I think it's that primal survival instinct. Like, they're literally fighting for their lives, like in the sense of like there are millions of dollars worth at stake here. So I think that's a really big part of that primal instinct.
For sure. And a lot of these athletes, they're just making their careers slowly, and like they're fighting their way up the ranks, and their stories are tough, and they're not making enough money to sustain themselves, and that's a whole different issue. But you know, these fighters are fighting for something way more than, you know, just themselves. It's crazy. They don't get the $40 million paychecks, signing bonuses for being drafted as a rookie. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You only get paid
when you get to the highest levels.
When you get to the highest levels. So you got to get there to get paid.
It's just their process. It's their version of the process.
When you start, you're making 5 to show, 5 to win. So you can walk out of there with 10, 15 grand and then have to pay managers, travel, coaches.
You make nothing at the end of the day. Yeah.
It's tough. It's a tough sport.
So moving on from like the actual experience of shooting UFC, you're also obviously, we just talked about it as if you're just sitting back and watching, but you're actually working these events. So one thing that you did at the beginning was shoot and create the content. Now, obviously, you have to earn your stripes in that sense, but what you're doing now is, instead of shooting the audience, you're shooting the content, you're curating the content.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I wanted to bring you on, is because you have that experience managing a social media page, which is a career line on it all in itself. I think maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, it's something they would give to interns.
Yeah.
But now it's like a good social media manager makes all the difference. So what's the biggest thing you've learned going from shooting the actual content to curating, posting, engaging on social? What's the biggest like challenge and learning curve you'd faced in terms of the difference between the two?
The hardest part is building a really good team. Like having people that see the long-term vision of what you're doing with the ability to still support a page financially is tough. Like these pages, monetizing an Instagram page is not something that, again, like you said, 3 or 4 years ago would even have been possible realistically, so it wasn't really an option, but now it's a huge thing. So understanding what works and what doesn't, having a team that's consistently motivated to be the best in the game, right? If we want to be the best fight network on the planet, it takes a lot. It takes multiple platforms, tons of people, news, graphics, original content, and one of the things we pride ourselves on is, making the most original content, interviews and original series and shows and podcasts and all that stuff, and it's tough. Like innovating is the hardest thing to do running a social media network. It's easy to go repost news and steal other people's bullshit and repurpose it as a different graphic. That everyone can do that. Everyone can find.
But it's about standing out.
It's about standing out and making content that people genuinely will, leave what they're doing to go and find your stuff. And it's hard to do. Like growing on YouTube, growing on TikTok, growing on Instagram. You've done an incredible job of putting your face out there on TikTok and bringing people to building yourself a community. It's tough to do. Building a community that will stay is. My eye is twitching just thinking about it. Fucking
But you guys, I think, like over 100,000 followers on Fight Club. How do you go? You said you had like 10 followers at first. How do you go from 10 or 0 to 140,000? I think you guys have something along
75.
175. Sorry, I
No,
my bad.
I just want to fact check you there.
175,000 roughly. How do you go from 10 to that?
Yeah, it's
not overnight.
It's just volume. It's just pure volume, to be honest. We got a nice initial push with Bisping. He gave us a shout out, got us to 10K really quick.
Of course. When you get the cosign.
There's your cheat code. Find an athlete, pay him a little bit to shout you out. You're at 10K. There you go. There's your little insider hack.
But how is it now? But you get to 10K,
Yeah.
you slowly build up. It's a grind. We know how, even with our social media. But like, how do you maintain that audience? It's 170,000 pairs of eyes.
Yeah.
How do you keep people engaged? How do you keep people coming back? How do you attract new people?
The MMA community, unlike any other sport, is ruthless. If you slip up even once, you are canceled, you are ousted from the community, you are a casual, which is a word that they love to use in the MMA. Like, it's tough. Being in the MMA space is, like,
unforgiving at best.
Unforgiving. So you have to be on 24/7 with your news coverage, your graphics. Everything has to be perfect at all times, but ultimately people just want to see that your page is advocating for the sport. So with everything we do graphics-wise and news-wise and content-wise, it really was just a process of showing people that we care about the fighters. We're here to post good stuff. We're not here to, slander anybody or do a lot of things that, the MMA community loves to do, which is shit on fighters. Like, they love to bring people down, and it's tough. But we're there to speak for the fighters, not against them. Mm-hmm. And people saw that, and the growth was quick.
What's been your biggest learning moment when it comes to like growing the page and developing this brand? What's been the biggest like learning?
The politics involved in social media is...
I relate.
Yeah, I would have never guessed that it's such a political game where you have to manage not only the page, but the personalities within them, right? Some people have different opinions on what they want to do, how they want to do them, how they want to work together, and managing, not necessarily on like the content side, but on the production side of things and relationship building. It's tough. There's people that want to work with you all the time because they see what you're doing, and you have to ask, is it for the right reasons? Do they want to join you because they are passionate, or do they want to join you because they see that you have a name and you're growing? It's tough, and I've made some big mistakes there. We've had some big setbacks with like who we brought on or why we brought them on. It ruffled feathers, but we fix them. We fix them and we move on, and
that's it. Just moving on to the next.
Going. Yeah, 2 years, almost 200K. I think that we're doing okay, and hopefully 10 years from now we can look back and say, we did the right thing.
What's the next step for you now in your career? What's the next? You mentioned really briefly, obviously, that you're going to be in Vegas coming up for a UFC event. Apart from that, though, like, what do you see ahead for yourself? You know, do you see what do you see in your future as a content creator within, you know, UFC, MMA?
One of the things that we've done really well is create original content. We did a podcast with some fighters, and we're trying to show a lot of behind the scenes of fighting. So I've partnered with some really big names in the industry. We're going to be producing some new vlog series content for Fight Week, working with fighters. For me, the goal is to keep building relationships with these athletes to the point where Fight Club is an established brand. And it's tough, like the name, you know, with the name, with the movie. Like we're competing with the movie.
Virtual Fight Club.
Yeah, you don't talk about.
You don't talk.
Yeah. So it's tough. We're competing with the name, but you have to build the brand. Like building Fight Club as an established social media network, it's working. It's happening. But I'd be so stupid to think that there won't be so many more, you know, bumps in the road and obstacles to overcome, and just got to keep growing, keep doing what we're doing without making it a larger than life thing. Keep taking those steps back to put perspective onto where we
understand where you started, look at where you are now, and understand that that's like not the end goal.
It's not the end goal.
It's kind of like humbling yourself in an interesting way.
Still enjoying, still going back and saying this is why I got into it in the first place, and I don't want it to ruin my love for the sport, which that happens a lot.
What's one event coming up that you're really looking forward to being at or shooting?
International Fight Week is July 2nd. It's going to be it's the consensus biggest event of the year all the time. There's a Hall of Fame ceremony with Daniel Cormier and Khabib getting inducted. Every fighter on the roster is going to be there. The fights are massive. We got some cool stuff in the works for the YouTube page. I'm so excited, man.
Lots of stuff.
International Fight Week is...
And what's... Last kind of question here to round out everything. You go from sneaking into sporting events. You end up shooting MMA within your community, getting to work at this company that steals social media handles and starting a monopoly. Purchases.
Social media handles.
It's you know, it's a legitimate business here.
Yes.
And then you move on to that. You meet Michael Bisping through this company.
Yep.
You build this relationship with him and this trust. You take the Fight Club brand to new heights. What's next for you beyond Fight Club? Like, what is the dream situation 5 years from now? Where are we going to see Michael in 5 years? Through this whole process, where is this going to? Where do you want it to take you?
God, that's such a good question.
It's like your typical interview question. Like, where do you want to be in 5 years?
So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Why do you want to work at our company?
I would love to be able to have a team of fighters, active UFC fighters on the roster creating content for Fight Club, and me being able to manage and tell their stories. To democratize the way that sports content is made so that the athletes can have a voice and make money in the game and grow their own personal brand through Fight Club. And for me to oversee that and keep managing this chaos.
Manager of chaos. One more thing from the manager of chaos. One thing I like to do is the one thing I like to do. I've only done one episode of these. This is the second one. Yeah. One thing I want to do is, obviously, I think there are people, and I've experienced this. There are people who want to work in sports content more than ever now because it's a legitimate it's a legitimate industry. Is working in social media, sports social media. But obviously, it's not an easy route, which is why I'm doing the YouTube thing, which is why I'm doing the TikTok thing, to tell people, hey, you can do this. This is how you do it. This is how you can set yourself ahead. Let's say, and just because I've run into people now, which is weird, I've run into people who are like, oh, I see your work. Like, I would love to be in the position you're in. What would you tell somebody right now who wants to work in UFC, who doesn't know where to start or is just getting started? What's the one piece of advice you would give to your younger self and say, like, this is what you need to do in order to get to where I am now? Whether that's just pick up a camera, sneak into sports games, like what would you tell? What's the piece of advice you would give?
The one thing is that you have to have tangible skills. Like, you need to have the skills that will get you through the networking opportunities. Networking is the foundation of everything that you will do. Never turn down opportunities, work your ass off, build your skills, work your ass off. Work your ass off is like the number one thing that will get you there. Be respectful of the relationships you build, work your ass off, work your ass off, work your ass off. Work your ass off. That's all it is.
This is going to be, this might be included in the podcast, but I just forgot to talk about it whatsoever, but I just know that this is about to die. But really quickly, Colorblind Sport was your handle before.
It was, yeah.
You're colorblind. I didn't know that until we met up. It's a really unique position to be a photographer, videographer, visual content creator, but be colorblind. What's that like, and what challenges do you have with something like that?
I see no fault in the way I edit.
Oh no, I think your edits are fantastic.
Nobody else agrees with me whatsoever. So
maybe I'm colorblind.
You might be. That's a nice blue sweater you got.
Yeah. Is it actually blue?
No. My editing style is unique to me because of the way I see things. And when I send it off, I'm lucky to have a lot of creator friends who are really talented and very honest when my shit is whack. Like my colors go crazy. If you go on my Instagram, you'll see some of the photos where I won't take advice from people because I like it. They're terrible, but it's my style.
But you like it.
Colorblind photography is my style. I edit it to my style, and I'm unapologetic about it.
Okay, but you changed the handle.
I had to change the handle because I was getting some backlash from people. Like the people thought that I was a racist. They were saying colorblind. Cancel culture is getting, to a point where I kind of want my name behind it, and I need to follow in your footsteps and put my name out there, my face out there, and build your personal brand.
And I need to follow in your footsteps and like start a social media empire at this point. Thank you for coming on this unnamed show yet. I don't know what it's going to be called, but one more thing. Where can the people find you? Social media, YouTube. I'll tag Fight Club and everything down below, but where can people find you on social?
Find me on Instagram at Michael Goiz, MICHAELGOIZ. Twitter, you won't find me, and then Fight Club everywhere else.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for coming on the show.
Anything
you want to add before we? No?
Yeah, give this guy a follow. He's taking over. He's taking over the game and putting us on these podcasts. But realistically, I only found him because he's so damn good at what he does. I appreciate you.
I appreciate
Thanks for having me.
And that's it for the episode today. Thank you guys for watching. Catch you on the next one.